Job chapters 4 to 7 today, and this continues the theme that the book of Job is very different to everything we've read so far in the Bible. It definitely has that vibe of, I mean, you can see why no one seems to think that this is a true story or anything like that. There's just the tone of it and all the rest of it. It's written in a very sort of Shakespearean sense almost, because this section is just 2 blocks of speech. So we have Eliphaz, who is a friend of Job who's come to see him after everything goes wrong. A big old speech from him to Job, and then the second half of this video here is Job's response to Eliphaz. Very long-winded, very flowery, not my cup of tea. I guess the tone of it does help clearly illustrate the point that this is not a true story, and that, as far as I'm aware, no one thinks it is a true story, literally. But the big problem in that, of course, is that because it's so flowery and poetic, and I'm not particularly good at flowery and poetic, it's a little bit difficult to establish exactly what people are actually saying. And there's a lot of words, but what are you actually getting at, sort of thing. I think it seems like Eliphaz is suggesting to Job that he must have done something wrong, because otherwise why would all this misfortune have befallen him? So he's a bit of a crap friend, really, isn't he? So a little odd. Then from there, Eliphaz goes on to have a big speech about how wonderful God is, sort of speech that makes no sense in the context of a real conversation, but makes perfect sense in the context of a story inserted into the Bible to try and illustrate something. Job then responds to Eliphaz, also in very long-winded Shakespearean and la-di-da sort of fashion. He seems to call out his friend for being a bit of a crap friend and pointing out that he's supposed to have my back here and being a bit rubbish. And again, we have the problem that because it's such flowery language, I find it quite difficult to interpret what he's really getting at. But he seems, very interestingly, to be dwelling on the fact that there's so much uncertainty in the fact that he doesn't know what he's done wrong. So he doesn't know that he's under attack from Satan because God basically dared him to do it. And he's just struggling with the idea of, or seems to be just struggling with the idea of, what are God's intentions and what are his plans and why is this happening to him? The second half of Job's speech is then more directed towards God. And he seems he wants to die. He doesn't understand why he can't be left alone. And at one point he actually says, "What is mankind that you give them so much attention?" And it's clearly a man in despair, and he just seems to want to be left alone. There's not much point in doing a short version of that story, I don't think, because that's just Eliphaz spoke for a bit and Job spoke for a bit, and that is it. The interesting points, though, still, is I don't know quite what to do with it, because this thing is in the Bible, despite the fact it's not true. So it's not there to illustrate historic accuracy or anything. Someone, or rather the Christian world as a whole, has looked at the book of Job and gone, yes, there's something so profound and brilliant in there that we're going to put it in the Bible, which you'd have to say is obviously the highest honour you can possibly have for anything written ever, especially if it's not true. And so it must have a deep and profound meaning, and it's very difficult to spot what that is. I mean, granted, we haven't finished yet, so perhaps that's to some extent. I guess what I thought it was going to be in advance, knowing that it was Job getting tested by the devil, was this idea that life is going to be suffering and there's hard things and bad things are going to happen to good people. And sure enough, this is what's happening. But because of the way it's done, in the context of God's had a meeting with Satan and allowed Satan to come and do all this stuff, it sort of takes away any sort of real world context. So yeah, I'm not quite sure what to do with it. Hopefully that will emerge as we progress. The next section will be the same. It will be another response from another one of Job's friends, and then Job responding to that. And it looks like God has a bit of a word at the end. So hopefully this is going to draw it all together. But in the minute, this thing is tricky and difficult to apply the weird situation to the real world.